All right, guys, today we're going to go over multiplying radicals. First, though, I want you to get out your homework that you turned in, the 1-4 and 1-5. So that was rewriting from rational exponent to radical form, and it was adding and subtracting radical expressions, and we're going to go over those answers together real quick. So get that worksheet out, pause the video if you need to, find it, and then come back. All right, so on the front, number 1 and 2, 1 wanted you to rewrite it into exponential form. So my power was 6, my root was 8. So that means that my exponent was 6 over 8. And if you wanted to, you could reduce that to 3 over 4, with 5 being our base. Number 2, it wanted us to rewrite it in radical form and simplify. So for this one, my exponent is 3 over 2. That means 3 is my power and 2 is my root. So I can rewrite it as the square root of 16 to the power of 3. To simplify it, I do the square root of 16, which is 4. And then I can do 4 to the power of 3, which is 4 times 4 times 4, which is 64. Number 3, I did at the end of the notes last time, so that's where all the work is, and make sure you have all the work there also. Number 4, it wanted everything to be equal to 4 times the square root of 3. This first one, it's in rational exponent form. They're both 1/3. So I rewrote it as cube root 4 plus cube root of 3, which is not going to give me what I want, so that box does not get checked. The next one, I rewrote them. So this had a power of 1/2, so this is the square root of 27. Here, power of 1/2, this is the square root of 3. Now, before I can add them, I have to simplify them. So the square root of 27, I broke apart to be 9 times 3. And I know the square root of 9 is 3. So that changes into 3 square root 3 plus square root 3. Now they both have the same radical, so I can add them together. They're coefficients. So I did 3 plus 1, and I got my 4 radical 3. So that box gets checked off. The next one, the square root of 32. I can break that apart to be 16 times 2. The square root of 16 is 4, so this is going to be equal to 4 square root of 2, which is not what I want, so that box is not checked. The square root of 48, I broke apart to be 16 times 3, and the square root of 16 is 4. So square root of 16 times square root of 3 is the same thing as 4 times the square root of 3, which is what we want to be equal to, so we're going to check off that box. The next one, we have 2 times the square root of 12. So I have to break apart my square root of 12, and I did that by doing 4 times 3. The square root of 4 is 2. So 2 times the square root of 4 times the square root of 3 is equal to 2 times 2 square root of 3. Multiply my pieces on the outside together. I get 4 times the square root of 3. That's what I want. I check it off. 2 times the square root of 18. Square root of 18, we break apart to be 9 times 2. The square root of 9 is 3, so that becomes 2 times 3 times the square root of 2. Multiply on the outside, I get 6 square root of 2, which is not what I want. And the last one, square root of 27 plus the square root of 3, that is actually the same thing as the second one. See how when we rewrote it, we made it into that same radical equation? So I showed my work again, and we do get 4 times the square root of 3. All right, on the back with adding and subtracting, so I reminded you what was like and unlike radicals. So we have to make sure they're the same before we can add. 5 and 6, their square roots were already matched. So number 5, they both had a square root of 5, so I went ahead and just did 2 plus 4, which is 6 square root 5. Number 6, they both have a square root of 3, so I just did 9 minus 4, so it gives me a 5 square root of 3. 7 and 8, I had some work to do. With number 7, I had to break apart 75 and 50. So 75 breaks apart to 25 times 3. The square root of 25 is 5. So the left-hand side simplified to 45 times the square root of 3. I messed up this one. And then 50 is 25 times 2. So that should be 5, and that should be a square root of 2 right there. Let me see if I can fix that for you. So this, let's fix it. Okay. So this should really be a square root of 2. So 2 times 5 is 10. There's still a square root of 2 on the inside. So that means I cannot add them together. So this is actually my answer. 45 square root 3 plus 10 square root 2. And since they're not the same, I cannot add them together. All right, number 8, 54 gets split apart to be 9 and 6. The square root of 9 is equal to 3, so that becomes 3 square root 6. 24 becomes 4 and 6. The square root of 4 is 2. So that becomes 2 square root 6. I can add them together because they both have a square root of 6. So that gives me 5 square root 6. All right, and then my last two. More stuff to break down. So on number 9, 27 breaks apart to be 9 and 3. The square root of 9 is 3, so that becomes 4 times 3, which is 12 square root 3. My other side, 18, became 9 and 2. The square root of 9 is 3, so that became minus 3 square root 2. They are different radicals, because one square root 3, one square root 2. Their radicands do not match. That's as far as that one goes. Finally, number 10, 40 breaks apart to 4 and 10. 90 breaks apart to 9 and 10, and 200 breaks apart to 102. So these each have their own perfect square inside. So here, the square root of 4 is 2, right? The square root of 9 is 3. The square root of 100 is 10. So they each have their own perfect square. And then at this point, I see that my first two both have a square root of 10. So I did 2 minus 3. And that's where I got negative 1 square root 10. And then this last piece stays 10 square root 2. I can't do anything else. I can't add them together because this 10 is inside a radical. This 10 is outside a radical. So they are not the same thing. And that's our answer. So that was your homework, going over that. So make sure you check your work. If you need to fix anything and resubmit it, you can. I'm going to move on now to today's lesson. This is Algebra 2. Let's get Algebra 1. Here you go. All right, so what we're going to do today is we're going to add, we're going to multiply radicals now. Instead of adding and subtracting, we're going to multiply. So some rules we have to remember. We have to remember when I am simplifying, there can be no perfect squares left underneath my radical. Okay. Remember those perfect squares? We're looking for like 1, 4, 9, 16, 25, 36, 49. What else we got? 64, 81, and 100. So when you take your quiz on Wednesday, these would be good numbers to have written down somewhere so you can look at them. Remember, the square root of 1 is 1. The square root of 4 is 2. 3. This would be a great thing to put on your cheat sheet when you take your quiz. You can always use a cheat sheet during your quiz or your notes. Okay, so we got to make sure that those blue numbers, those are perfect squares. Those cannot be left inside my radical. We can always simplify those. We also cannot have any negatives in under our radical expressions. So we cannot have the square root, like the square root of negative 3, not allowed. If I had negative square root 3, that one's okay because the negative's on the outside. All right, so with this one, we have a product rule. Product rule tells me I can multiply anything on the outside together, so A times B, and they stay on the outside, and then I can multiply anything on the inside radical together, and it just stays inside. The only thing we have to make sure is that our root or our index must match. Okay, and I'll make sure that they always do for you when you're multiplying. So your roots must match. So they must both be a square root or both be a cube root, something like that. Once we multiply, then we simplify. Okay, so after we multiply our pieces together, so we're going to multiply, then simplify. And that's when we try to break apart my radical and see if we can take things out. All right. Number 1, square root of 3 times square root of 15. I'm going to multiply the pieces inside together, which is 3 and 15, right? That equals the square root of 45. So I have multiplied. Now I want to simplify. So remember this list right here, these blue numbers, I'm trying to see if I can take any of those out of what we have. So I can divide 45 by saying that that is 9 times 5, because 9, right, is on my list. It's this one. The square root of 9 is 3, right, because I can break this down to be 3 and 3 times the square root of 5. Remember, Mama's rule says you need a partner, so that's why it simplifies to just 3 square root 5, and that's our answer for that one. Number 2, we're going to start off by multiplying 24 times 2 because they're both under the radical. So that gives me the square root of 48 to work with. To break this apart, most of you probably think of 6 and 8, so I'll go with that. 6 can break apart again to 3 and 2. 8 can break apart to 4 and 2. And then 4 can break apart again, right, to be 2 and 2. Okay. So the end of my branches, I got these two, I got these, and I got this. Mama's rule says we have to take out pairs together. So here's a pair of 2s, so a 2 comes out of the house. Here is another pair of 2s, so another 2 comes out of the house. But square root of 3 is by himself inside. Again, my same product rule, multiply what's outside together, so this simplifies to 4 square root of 3. Number 3, now we have things on the outside and the inside. So outside of my radical, we have 2 times 3, right? They're outside of the radical. And inside of my radical, I have 2 times 7. So my outside simplifies to 6. My inside simplifies to 14. I have multiplied, now we simplify. 14 can only break apart to be 2 and 7. None of those repeat, so that's not going to help me. So this is as simplified as it's going to get. So this is my answer. All right, number 4. Again, my pieces on the outside. I have 4 and 3 on the outside of my radical. And I have 6 and 2 inside my radical. So when I simplify these pieces, I get a 12 on the outside. I also get a 12 on the inside of my radical. I have multiplied. Now we simplify. Break apart 12. I can break it apart to be 4 and 3. I can break apart 4 to be 2 and 2, right? So Mama's rule says a 2 gets to come out of the house. Remember, there's already a 12 outside of the house. So now I'm bringing a 2 outside of the house, but this 3 is still inside. So this will simplify to 24 square root of 3. Number 5, I see a couple things. I see parentheses, and I see a negative sign. Well, parentheses like this is just another way of showing multiplication, so that's fine. And the negative's on the outside of the radical, so we're okay. All right, remember the rule was it couldn't be inside. So outside was fine, but inside was not. So the negative that is given to us right now is on the outside, so we're okay to go. All right, multiply my outside numbers together. That is -3 times 4. And then multiply what's inside the radicals together. That is 18 times 3. So my outside pieces are going to simplify to -12. My inside pieces, what is that? That is going to be 18 times 3 gives me 54. All right, I have multiplied. Now let's simplify. 54, I can break it apart. What times what is 54? 9 times 6 is 54. Okay. Remember, we still have this -12 out front. 9 can break apart to 3 and 3. 6 can break apart to 3 and 2. Still have -12. Mama's rule, I can take pairs out. Here's a pair of 3s, so they're going to come out of the house where -12 already is. These don't have a partner, so they're going to stay inside the radical. So this simplifies to -36, and then inside is just a 6, like that. All right. Next one. All right, so there's only a 3 on the outside. Technically, there's a 1 over here. So you have 3 times 1 on the outside, which is just 3. The inside of my radical, I want to change colors. There we go. The inside of my radical, why is this not working? There we go. We have 3 and 12, which simplifies to 36. I have multiplied. Now let's simplify. All right, so 36 is going to break apart to 6 times 6. Look at that. Mama's rule. I already have a partner, right? So that means 6 gets to come out of the house. But remember, there was already a 3 out there. So this one, we just get 18. So my square root completely simplified away. All right. Here we go, number 7. So 7, 8, and 9, we're still multiplying. This is a bit of a distribution going on here. So we have pieces inside of the parenthesis being added together. My radicals are not the same, so I can't actually add and subtract like I did last lesson. So here we're going to distribute and multiply. So the square root of 2 times the square root of 8. They're both under the radical. So I can multiply them together to give me 16. Okay. Then I'm going to do square root of 2 times the square root of 3. And there's a plus sign here, so I'll keep that there. I get to multiply those together to give me the square root of 6. All right, I have multiplied, I have distributed my square root of 2. Now we're going to simplify if I can. Okay, the square root of 16 I can break apart to be 4 and 4. Look at that, Mama's rule, there's a partnership. So 4 comes out of the house. Square root of 6 is 3 and 2. Nothing repeats. So plus square root 6 has to stay. And that's our answer. Number 8. We're going to take 3 square root of 5 and distribute that. So notice I have an outside and inside piece. So 3 will only be multiplied to other things that are outside of the radical. Square root of 5 will only be multiplied with other things that are inside the radical. Okay? So here I have 3 square root 5 times 2. Well, 3 and 2 are both outside of a radical, so that becomes 6 square root 5. All right. square root of 3, 3 square root 5 times, there's a negative here, so that's really like a negative 1 square root 2. 3 and negative 1 are on the outside, so we get negative 3. 5 and 2 are both underneath my radical, so I'm going to multiply those together to get square root of 10. I have multiplied, now we simplify. 5 cannot break down. 10 can break down to 5 and 2, but none of those repeat, so the square root of 10 is as simple as it gets. So this is my answer. All right, last one. This time I had the square root of 3 being distributed. So square root of 3 times 4. Well, 3 is inside the radical, 4 is outside the radical, so I cannot multiply those numbers together. It's just going to be written as 4 square root 3. Distribute it to my second piece. I have square root of 3 times 3 square root 6. Remember, you can put a 1 out here if you want to. Outside the radical, we have 1 and 3, so that's a positive 3. Inside the radical, we have 3 and 6, so that becomes 18. I have multiplied. Now we're going to simplify. The square root of 3 cannot be broken down, so my green piece, the 4 square root of 3, is as low as it's going to go. I can't do anything with that anymore. But over here, 18 can break down. I can break down 18 to be 9 and 2. Okay, so now I have 4 square root 3, and I'm going to add to this. 9 breaks apart to be square root of 3 times square root of 3. We still have square root 2. Mama's rule, we have a partnership. They get to leave the house. So this becomes 3 times 3 square root 2. And since over here we had 4 square root 3, I cannot add these together because I have a square root of 3 and a square root of 2. So we're going to leave our answer as 4 square root 3 plus 9 square root 2.